Dedra Nicole Lane killed her husband for $5 million in insurance. Sharon Hughes watched hers collapse on the field, then sued for $21.5 million. Eleanor Perfetto and Lorraine Dixon battled the NFL in multi-million-dollar lawsuits and won. These are the unbelievable stories of wives left behind by dead NFL players. Dedra Lane. Dedra Nicole Lane was involved in a highly publicized case following the death of her husband, Fred Lane, a former NFL running back for the Carolina Panthers and briefly the Indianapolis Colts. What makes this case particularly shocking is that Dedra wasn't grieving her husband's death. She was the one who caused it. Fred Lane, a 24-year-old NFL running back, was fatally shot by Dedra Lane on July 6, 2000, in their suburban Charlotte, North Carolina home. The circumstances surrounding this tragic event paint a picture of a troubled marriage, marked by allegations of abuse, infidelity, and financial desperation. Dedra, then 25, was charged with murder 7 weeks later, on August 23, 2000. The prosecution's case was built around a compelling motive: money. Prosecutors alleged she killed him to collect a $5 million life insurance policy, a staggering sum that would have set her up for life. But Dedra's defense team painted an entirely different picture. Dedra's defense claimed she acted in self-defense as a battered wife, citing physical abuse by Fred, including an incident where he allegedly choked her and questioned the paternity of their newborn child. The couple's relationship was tumultuous from the start. The couple had 2 young children, and their marriage, which began in 1998, was described as troubled, marked by mutual allegations of abuse and infidelity. The legal proceedings dragged on for years, with Dedra's fate hanging in the balance. Finally, in 2003, a resolution came. On August 14, 2003, Dedra pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in Fred Lane's death, avoiding a potential first-degree murder charge that could have carried the death penalty. She was sentenced on November 5, 2003 to nearly 8 years in prison, specifically 7 years and 11 months. Dedra Lane was released from the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh on March 3, 2009 at 9:25 a.m. after serving nearly 6 years of her sentence. Her release marked the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another, a life forever marked by her actions on that July night in 2000. After her release, Dedra largely disappeared from public view. There is limited publicly available information about Dedra Lane's activities after her release in 2009. She was expected to live with her parents in Columbia, South Carolina, and was placed on 9 months of probation following her release. Unlike Dedra, the next woman's husband was stolen by a degenerative brain disease. Lindsay Jackson. Vincent Jackson passed away on February 15, 2021, at the age of 38, leaving behind a successful career as an NFL wide receiver and a family struggling to understand what had happened to their beloved husband and father. Vincent Jackson was found dead in a hotel room in Brandon, Florida, after checking in on January 11, 2021. The circumstances surrounding his death were puzzling and tragic. His family had reported him missing, but authorities had located him and canceled the missing person case after assessing his well-being. 3 days later, he was found deceased by a housekeeper. The initial cause of death provided some answers but raised even more questions. The Hillsborough County medical examiner later determined that Vincent's death was due to chronic alcohol use, with a blood alcohol content of 0.28% at the time of death, and the manner of death was classified as natural. For Lindsay, this explanation felt incomplete. It didn't explain why a man who had been a dedicated athlete and family man had spiraled into such destructive behavior. The real answers came months later, when post-mortem examination results were released. A post-mortem examination by researchers at Boston University's CTE Center revealed that Vincent had stage 2 CTE, a degenerative brain disease linked to repeated head trauma. Suddenly, Vincent's behavioral changes, his struggle with alcohol, and his ultimate death began to make tragic sense. For Lindsay, the CTE diagnosis was both devastating and validating. It explained the changes she had witnessed in her husband during his final years. She revealed Vincent's stage 2 CTE diagnosis, aiming to raise awareness about the disease, which can only be diagnosed post-mortem. She shared that Vincent suffered from memory loss, erratic behavior, and relied on alcohol to cope with a fuzzy brain, symptoms she later connected to CTE. Lindsay's advocacy efforts extended beyond just telling her story. Following Vincent's death, Lindsay and the Jackson family donated his brain to the VA UCLF Brain Bank, affiliated with Boston University's CTE Center, to advance research on CTE. This decision reflected Vincent's lifelong commitment to helping others, even in death. By donating his brain to the VA UCLF Brain Bank, we hope to continue to see advancements in CTE research, enabling physicians to diagnose the disease in the living and ultimately find treatment options in the future, Lindsay stated, demonstrating her commitment to ensuring that Vincent's death would contribute to preventing similar tragedies for other families. Beyond her advocacy work, Lindsay has had to navigate the challenges of single parenthood while processing her own grief. Lindsay and Vincent had 4 children together, and she has been focused on preserving their father's memory while helping them understand the circumstances of his death. death. While others in this video fight for justice or reform, the next woman would take 2 lives and shatter the lives of many more. Lisa Brown. Lisa Brown was involved in a multi-year affair with Buster Barnett, a former NFL tight end for the Buffalo Bills from 1981 to 1984. The relationship between Brown and Barnett was more than just an affair. It was a complex arrangement where Barnett owned Brown's home and vehicle, indicating a significant financial and personal relationship. Lisa Brown wasn't a stranger to criminal behavior or poor decision-making. Her history revealed a pattern of concerning actions that should have served as warning signs. In April 2013, Lisa Brown kidnapped her 12-year-old daughter Summer from Texas after losing custody. This action triggered an Amber Alert, and it took authorities 3 days to locate Brown and her daughter in Indiana. She was sentenced to 8 years of probation by a Dallas, Texas judge, Teresa Hawthorne, in March 2014. This prior kidnapping reveals a disturbing pattern of using extreme measures when faced with losing access to people she felt entitled to control. The events of July 2015 began with what might seem like a trivial trigger, but would escalate into unimaginable tragedy. Brown's actions were reportedly driven by jealousy over Buster Barnett's plan to take his wife, Sandra Barnett, on a trip to Las Vegas. On July 15, 2015, Brown confronted Buster at his workplace, expressing anger about the planned vacation. Sandra Barnett, a 58-year-old special needs teacher, was on the phone with her friend Ruby Chester at approximately 11:20 a.m. when Brown arrived. Chester overheard a woman, later identified as Brown, yelling, open this door, or I'm going to kill you." Sandra was heard pleading, "Don't hurt me, ma'am, I don't know you," and then asked, "Are you Lisa Brown?" This exchange reveals that Sandra was aware of Brown's identity, suggesting that Brown's harassment of Sandra had been ongoing for at least 2 years, including showing up at the Barnett's home, texting, and calling Sandra. Brown abducted Sandra at gunpoint, using handcuffs she had purchased specifically for the kidnapping. The premeditation evident in this purchase reveals that this wasn't a crime of passion, but a calculated act of violence. The tragic conclusion came the following day. On July 16, 2015, authorities in Carroll County, Georgia spotted Brown's Dodge Durango and initiated a pursuit. The chase crossed state lines into Alabama, with Alabama State Patrol joining in. At mile marker 208 on Interstate 20 in Cleburne County, Alabama, Brown abruptly stopped the vehicle in the middle of the highway. She retrieved a gun from the back seat, shot Sandra Barnett, and then turned the gun on herself, resulting in both women's deaths. The aftermath of this tragedy rippled through multiple communities. Sandra, a Jackson State University graduate, was a beloved special needs teacher at McNair Middle School in DeKalb County for nearly 20 years. Her colleagues and students remembered her as vibrant and caring, making her senseless death even more tragic. Some women lost their husbands gradually. The next woman watched hers collapse and die right there on the field. Sharon Hughes. Chuck, a wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, suffered a fatal heart attack on October 24, 1971, during a game against the Chicago Bears at Tiger Stadium. He was 28 years old, and Sharon was 25 at the time, left with their 23-month-old son, Brandon Shane Hughes. The moment that changed Sharon's life forever was captured not just by television cameras, but by her own eyes. Sharon was in the stands with other players' wives when Chuck collapsed. She described the moment as deeply traumatic, noting in a 2013 interview, "It's like being in a time warp. You know you are there, but you are floating in the ether." She rode in the ambulance with her husband to Henry Ford Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The medical examination revealed the true cause of Chuck's death. The autopsy revealed Chuck had undiagnosed advanced arterial sclerosis with a coronary thrombosis caused by a dislodged blood clot, likely from a tackle, and possibly a second heart attack following an earlier undetected one. Sharon's response to her husband's death was swift and decisive. In October 1972, Sharon filed a $21.5 million malpractice lawsuit against Henry Ford Hospital, alleging they failed to diagnose Chuck's heart condition after he sought medical attention for chest pain in May 1971, which was misdiagnosed as a spleen injury. The lawsuit was significant not just for its size, but for what it represented: a widow taking on a major medical institution and demanding accountability. The lawsuit was settled in October 1974 for an undisclosed amount after 3 days of testimony. While the settlement amount was never publicly disclosed, the resolution provided Sharon with some measure of justice and financial security as she faced the challenge of raising her young son alone. Life after Chuck's death required Sharon to rebuild everything. After Chuck's death, Sharon moved to Texas, where she raised her son Brandon. She worked for the school system in Sheridan, Texas, and later retired. The move to Texas represented a fresh start, away from the memories and media attention that surrounded Chuck's death in Detroit. The NFL community rallied around Sharon in her time of need. All 40 Lions teammates, including head coach Joe Schmidt, attended Chuck's funeral in San Antonio. Letters of sympathy, including one from President Richard Nixon were sent to Sharon, acknowledging Chuck's skill and sportsmanship. Additionally, a $10,000 trust fund was established for Brandon by an insurance company, and the Detroit Lions set up an education scholarship fund to support him. Like Sharon, the next woman didn't just mourn, she fought, and her lawsuit is among the most detailed and far-reaching of them all. Allison Owens. Allison Owens is the widow of Terry Owens, a former NFL player who played as an offensive tackle for the San Diego Chargers in the 1960s and 1970s. Terry passed away in 2012 due to CTE. Terry's decline was gradual but devastating, typical of CTE's progression. Terry Owens played for the San Diego Chargers during the 1960s and 1970s, a time when protective equipment was minimal, increasing the risk of head injuries. Symptoms of CTE, such as memory loss, confusion, and difficulty with everyday tasks like using a keyboard or cell phone, began appearing approximately 30 years after his retirement. For Allison, watching her husband's deterioration was heartbreaking, but her response to his death would create a lifeline for hundreds of other women facing similar circumstances. Rather than retreating into private grief, she channeled her pain into building something meaningful for others walking the same difficult path. Allison Owens has been a key figure in establishing and growing a Facebook group dedicated to the wives and caregivers of professional football players diagnosed with CTE. This group was initiated in April 2016, and by September 2017 had grown to over 2,500 members, with approximately 75 new members joining monthly. A notable example of her involvement includes connecting a woman in her community whose husband had committed suicide to the Facebook group. This action provided immediate support, with group members organizing meal schedules, sending gifts, cards, and providing financial assistance to the grieving family. Allison's role in facilitating this support demonstrates how her network has moved beyond online conversation to provide real, tangible help to families in crisis. She has also been part of broader advocacy efforts to push for better recognition and support for CTE-related issues. This includes participating in discussions about the NFL's responsibility to support players and families dealing with the disease, especially in light of the thousands of concussion lawsuits filed against the league. Allison added her name to one of the concussion lawsuits against the NFL, which addressed the league's handling of brain injuries. The NFL settled these lawsuits in 2013, agreeing to pay $765 million over 65 years for players affected by conditions like ALS, Parkinson's, dementia, and death from CTE, with damages later uncapped to allow up to $5 million per player for severe cases. Her involvement in the lawsuit reflects her commitment to seeking justice and compensation for families impacted by CTE. Of all the widows who've taken on the NFL, few come armed with the same qualifications as the next woman, Eleanor Perfetto. Eleanor Perfetto is a prominent figure known for her advocacy work following the death of her husband, Ralph Wenzel, a former NFL player who played as an offensive guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers and San Diego Chargers from 1966 to 1973. Wenzel developed dementia, later diagnosed as CTE, and passed away in 2012 at age 69. What sets Eleanor apart from many other NFL widows is her professional background. Perfetto, a medical researcher with a PhD in public health and a senior director at Pfizer, has been a vocal advocate for retired NFL players and others affected by brain trauma, particularly in the context of CTE. This combination of personal experience and professional expertise has made her one of the most formidable advocates in the fight for CTE recognition and player safety. Ralph's decline was particularly severe, representing one of the most devastating cases of CTE-related dementia documented in former NFL players. Ralph Wenzel began showing signs of cognitive impairment in the mid-1990s, with a formal diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment in 1999, which progressed to severe dementia. His condition was linked to repeated head trauma from his football career, later confirmed as advanced CTE posthumously when his brain was found to have atrophied to 910 grams, roughly the size of a one-year-old's brain. Wenzel's dementia led to significant challenges, including paranoia, hallucinations, and loss of basic functions like speaking, walking, and eating. He required assisted living for the last 5.5 years of his life, residing in a facility near Annapolis, Maryland. For Eleanor, watching her husband's complete transformation from the man she married to someone who couldn't recognize her was devastating, but it also fueled her determination to fight for other families facing similar circumstances. Eleanor didn't wait until after Ralph's death to begin her advocacy. She was confronting the NFL establishment years before many people had even heard of CTE. She had begun this work before Wenzel's death, notably confronting NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell in 2008 after being excluded from a meeting about late-life care for retired players and testifying before a House Judiciary Committee Committee in 2009 about the NFL's denial of the connection between brain trauma and dementia. After Ralph's death in June 2012, Eleanor's advocacy intensified. Perfetto continued her advocacy for recognizing the link between football-related head trauma and brain diseases like CTE. After Wenzel's death, she remained a leading voice, emphasizing the real impact of CTE on players and their families. In 2013, she spoke to reporters after oral arguments in a U.S. District Court case in Philadelphia involving the NFL and retirees seeking damages for head trauma injuries. In 2010, Perfetto filed one of the first workers' compensation claims with the NFL, arguing that Wenzel's dementia resulted from football-related injuries. This lawsuit was part of a broader effort to hold the NFL accountable. Her involvement in the legal battles helped establish precedents that would benefit thousands of other former players and their families. This settlement eventually covered 20,000 retired players, with payouts of up to $4 million for those diagnosed with CTE posthumously. The NFL's legal battles over brain injuries are complex, but few women have entered the ring with both the heartbreak of personal loss and the professional firepower of a legal expert like the next widow, Lorraine Dixon. Lorraine Dixon is the widow of Ricky Dixon, a former NFL player who played as a defensive back for the Cincinnati Bengals and Los Angeles Raiders from 1988 to 1993. Ricky Dixon passed away on August 1st, 2020, at the age of 53 after battling ALS, a neurodegenerative disease linked to CTE. Diagnosed with ALS in 2013, Ricky's condition deteriorated significantly, requiring extensive medical care, including a ventilator, and communication through eye movements and thumb gestures by 2017. As Lorraine watched her husband's decline, she found herself not just as a caregiver, but as a navigator of the complex legal and medical systems that were supposed to help families like theirs. As Ricky's primary caregiver, Lorraine managed his intensive medical needs, including navigating the complexities of his condition and the financial burdens associated with it. Her role extended beyond caregiving to advocacy, as she became a vocal critic of the NFL's handling of concussion-related issues and the settlement process. The NFL concussion settlement process would become a major focus of Lorraine's advocacy efforts. Lorraine was deeply involved in navigating the NFL concussion settlement process on behalf of Ricky, who was awarded approximately $4.5 million due to his ALS diagnosis, which is presumptively linked to CTE in the settlement terms. After legal fees, medical liens, and disputed fees, the family received about $3 million. Lorraine, an attorney, has been a prominent figure in advocating for former NFL players and their families, particularly in the context of the NFL concussion settlement and the broader impact of football-related brain injuries. This combination gave her unique insights into both the emotional toll of caregiving and the legal complexities that families face. The caregiving burden that Lorraine shouldered was immense. Before Ricky's death, Lorraine was his primary caregiver, managing his medical care and daily needs as his condition worsened. She described the emotional and physical toll of caring for Ricky, particularly in 2017 when he was on a ventilator full-time and communicated minimally. Her commitment to Ricky's care while simultaneously fighting legal battles on his behalf demonstrates the extraordinary challenges faced by NFL families dealing with degenerative diseases. After Ricky's passing, Lorraine's role as a family anchor likely persisted, as she supported their children and maintained Ricky's legacy. Ricky's induction into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2019 was a point of pride for the family. This recognition came during the most difficult period of his illness, providing some measure of acknowledgement for his contributions to the sport that ultimately contributed to his decline. If there's one woman who cracked the NFL's wall of denial wide open, it's the next widow, Maryanne Easterling. Maryanne Easterling is the widow of Ray Easterling, a former NFL safety who played for the Atlanta Falcons from 1972 to 1979. Ray Easterling died by suicide on April 19, 2012, at the age of 62, after suffering from CTE. Maryanne's decision to pursue legal action against the NFL was groundbreaking. Ray Easterling was a lead plaintiff in a federal class action lawsuit filed in Philadelphia in August 2011, alongside 6 other former players, including Jim McMahon. The lawsuit accused the NFL of failing to properly treat players for concussions and concealing the link between football and long-term brain injuries such as CTE. This lawsuit would eventually grow to include thousands of former players and their families, fundamentally changing how the NFL approached brain injury claims. Maryanne was clear about her goals in pursuing legal action against the NFL. Maryanne aimed to hold the NFL accountable and establish a fund for players suffering from traumatic brain injuries. She emphasized that her fight was not just about financial compensation, but about ensuring players could access testing testing, treatment, and support for CTE and related conditions. She stated, "The goal is to see that the NFL takes responsibility for what they tried to bury for so many decades and establish a fund for players to access when they find that they're in situations like Easterling's." The confirmation of Ray's CTE diagnosis provided both closure and validation for Maryanne's advocacy efforts. A post-mortem autopsy in July 2012 confirmed moderate CTE, validating Maryanne's suspicions about the impact of his football-related head injuries. Maryanne intuitively decided to have Ray's brain autopsied, believing it aligned with his desire to reveal the truth about his condition. The autopsy confirmed CTE, providing closure and further fueling her advocacy. She stated, "It verified everything and expressed sadness for the pain Ray endured." The legal victory that Maryanne helped achieve had far-reaching implications for the NFL and retired players. In 2013, a settlement was reached in the concussion-related lawsuit, with the NFL agreeing to pay close to $800 million to diagnose and compensate retired players with brain injuries. Maryanne expressed relief at the settlement, noting it was long overdue and would help players in need, with $10 million allocated for medical research. She believed the settlement tacitly acknowledged the NFL's responsibility, even though the league admitted no wrongdoing. This settlement would eventually provide compensation and medical support for thousands of former players and their families, representing one of the most significant victories in the fight for player safety and brain injury recognition. The personal toll that Maryanne endured as Ray's caregiver was immense. Before Ray's death, Maryanne faced significant challenges as his caregiver. She described living with fear due to Ray's unpredictable temper and physical strength, a common experience for families dealing with CTE. She noted, "One of the aspects of this disease is inexplicable explosions of temper and anger. There's a measure of fear living with them, fear for the wives and the children." The next woman didn't lose her husband to a sudden collapse or early illness. He died in old age. But that didn't stop her from standing up and demanding what the league owed. Sarah Goldston. Sarah Goldston was the widow of Ralph Goldston, one of the first black players to integrate the Philadelphia Eagles in 1952. Ralph died in 2011 at the age of 82. Sarah and Ralph's relationship was forged during an era when professional football was just beginning to integrate, creating unique challenges that would test their bond throughout their lives together. Sarah and Ralph met in their hometown of Campbell, Ohio, and shared a life marked by the challenges of racial discrimination during Ralph's NFL career in the 1950s. Ralph faced significant adversity, including racial slurs and exclusion from social aspects of team life, which Sarah witnessed firsthand. The discrimination that Ralph faced during his NFL career extended beyond the playing field and into the couple's daily life. The couple lived in North Philadelphia during the NFL season and returned to Ohio afterward, maintaining a strong bond despite the isolation they experienced. Ralph's post-NFL career included decades of work in football, particularly as a scout for the Seattle Seahawks, though he never achieved his goal of becoming a head coach. Sarah supported Ralph throughout these career struggles, understanding that his contributions to the game were often undervalued because of the era in which he played and the racial barriers he faced. After Ralph's death in 2011, Sarah's primary documented activity centered around seeking recognition and compensation for the health issues Ralph had suffered. After Ralph's death in 2011, Sarah's primary documented activity centered around advocating for recognition and compensation for the health issues Ralph suffered, particularly Alzheimer's disease, which his family believed was linked to brain injuries sustained during his NFL career. In 2018, the Goldston family was awarded $160,000 from the settlement, a process that required significant effort to compile decades-old medical records and witness testimonies documenting Ralph's decline. The evidence required to support their claim painted a heartbreaking picture of Ralph's decline. For example, neighbors provided letters recalling instances of Ralph's confusion, such as standing outside in the Ohio winter disoriented and neglecting personal care. Sarah's determination was evident, as Ursula noted her mother deserves this money for enduring Ralph's struggles, including episodes of rage. These episodes of confusion and anger were characteristic of the brain damage that many former NFL players experienced, but documenting them decades after they occurred required the kind of detailed memory and persistent effort that Sarah demonstrated throughout the process. The $160,000 settlement that Sarah and her family eventually received was more than just financial compensation. It represented recognition of Ralph's sacrifice and the toll that his NFL career had taken on his long-term health. For a woman who had watched her husband face discrimination throughout his career and then struggle with cognitive decline in his later years, this recognition was both vindication and validation of the struggles they had endured together. Like this video? Click on the card showing on your screen for more.